Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. Today, we have a new to me author, Ken Schafer, all the way from San Diego, California, and he's coming in to read a bit from his young adult novel entitled An Otherwise Perfect Plan. Welcome to the program, Ken.
Hey, don't forget the subtitle, which is a novel of mystery, love, and of chocolate that defies description.
Wow, that's a mouthful. No pun intended, but yes. Okay. Um, so Ken Schafer started his professional writing career as a screenwriter, working for companies as diverse as Disney, Paramount, and ABC, and on projects ranging from a prequel to Sleeping Beauty to Star Trek: The Next Generation and ABC Night at the Movies. His passion for all kinds of writing and enthusiasm for his daughter of all things world related inspired him to branch out into children's books. He is represented by Anne McDermott at AM Management and can be usually found in San Diego along with his wife and a Schrödinger's number of cats. I love that phrase. I love the idea that you might have more cats than not at any
Yes,
given moment.
exactly. Exactly.
That's fantastic. What made you decide to pick up a YA novel?
Um, my daughter. This started originally back when she was in the YA initial age range,
Mhm.
and she introduced us to a whole bunch of YA novels. She was the kind of kid who would walk around carrying two or three books at all times. It was the
Sounds like we could
only
have been friends.
I know.
Yeah.
It's the only thing she ever spent her own money on. Um, and anyways, so I just started reading them and got kind of inspired and said, hey, I could do this. I mean, not as they were a bad thing, but not
No,
that
but
sounds
like,
a little
hey, this
weird,
is an adventure I could go on.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. That's
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this book. What's the basic premise and storyline and stuff? Give us a little intro.
Okay. The basic storyline is there is a young girl well, not a sophomore in high school who is living with her mother. She's been a single mother working two jobs for her entire life. She knows nothing about her father,
Okay.
other than they have a photo strip of him and her mom in from a photo booth in Vegas, uh,
Okay.
the weekend that she was conceived.
Okay.
And that's her mom won't tell her anything else. Um, I'm going to read the intro chapter, chapter one, which kind of gets into this.
Okay.
So I won't.
So I would imagine once she wants to go on the quest to discover who her father is, adventure and hilarity ensue.
Well, hopefully even before that, but yes.
Awesome. Okay, I am really excited to hear this. I love YA literature. I think it's just super fun because you get to play with a bunch of different themes and adventure type storylines.
I
So
got a very interesting quick side note. I got a very interesting review on Amazon from just a reader who said that this was a really interesting book because there are no bad guys. There's no villain. That all of the conflict just comes out of life. That it's not
yeah,
conflict, So I hadn't set out to do that, but it sort of turned out that way, and
that's very cool. That
yeah.
does make it more accessible, I think, to
Right,
teenagers.
right. Yeah, they ended it with it's just like life, only funnier.
Yeah,
So
I
hopefully,
like it.
hopefully you guys agree.
Yeah, absolutely. When you are ready, please, sir, take the
Okay.
microphone and read aloud.
Imagine I'm a 16-year-old girl. Yeah, good luck with that. Um,
Okay.
chapter one, in which my English teacher completely loses it. I can't believe he's still obsessed. I don't know how long ago it was, but way back before it was even a thing, my best friend, formerly known as Peter, started baking. Well, perhaps that's not exactly the right verb, because what comes out of his oven bears as much resemblance to bread as it does to, say, reinforced concrete. Now, why a teenage boy who's built like a refrigerator is baking bread in the first place is a whole other story. The short version is that it's my fault, because I was the one who gave him the book The Hunger Games for his birthday. If you've been living in a cave for the past couple of decades, or are reading this in some far distant future where no one knows who Katniss Everdeen is, well, it kind of sucks to be you, because it's a really great book. The long version would probably require a panel of psychologists, years of intensive therapy, and a whole lot of dark chocolate to get through. But suffice it to say that while the rest of the world was kind of fixated on the whole kids killing kids part of the book, what does Peter take from it? That boys can bake. Yeah, go figure. Oh, and of course, since the character in the book who bakes bread is named Peta, Peter decided that that was going to be his new name. The only problem with this otherwise brilliant little plan is that we live here in Boston, home of the silent R. You know, Park the Car and Harvard Yard and all that. So insisting that he be called Peta rather than, well, Peta is kind of insane in its own right. Now, you're probably asking yourself what a 16-year-old girl is doing with a boy as her best friend. Or you would have had I gotten around to telling you I was a 16-year-old girl. Well, surprise! I am. My name's Gwen Pendergrass, and don't get me started on the baggage that last name comes with. And he is, so you might as well just start dealing with the concept. Or you could move on to some other book entirely, one which could perhaps reasonably be called intelligible. And I wouldn't fault you. I mean, my mom's the writer anyway, as you've probably guessed from all this incoherent ranting. She can't spell to save her life, but neither could Shakespeare, so there you go. Me? Well, I'm not sure what I am, but I'm 16, so lay off. I'll figure it out eventually. Okay, start at the beginning, Mom always tells me, so here goes. I was born at the usual age and in the usual manner. At least so I've been told, as it's not like I remember it at all, which is probably all for the best, what with all the squeezing, screaming, and crying that I've heard goes on. In any case, it's always been just my mom and me, and since I'm not much of a believer in virgin birth or parthenogenesis, see, Mom, I do pay attention in biology class. Well, at least sometimes. I've always assumed Dad was out there somewhere. I even have a small strip of photos of him and his mom in some photo booth at a casino in Vegas. They both look kind of drunk, but really happy, which I suppose explains a lot. Me in particular, or at least my aforementioned birth 9 months later. But as I was saying, Dad's never been in the picture, or outside the Vegas ones, if you get my meaning. And while I'm not thrilled with the idea, for the most part I don't dwell on it. It's just my life, such as it is. Now, if you happen to do the math, which I assure you I would never do in your place, you'll have figured out that I'm a high school soph, which is just about as much fun as it sounds. In English class, we've just finished reading Oedipus Rex. You know, that timeless story of a boy who kills his father and marries his mother, something high school students throughout history have deeply related to. So, using Oedipus's failed relationship with his father as an inspiration, my English teacher, the inimitable Mrs. Beecham, tells us as we're scrambling to get our stuff into our backpacks. You are going to write about your earliest recollection of you and your father doing something meaningful together. Something other than going to his parole hearing, watching TV, or playing video games. My fellow students let out the traditional collective groan of dismay, which Mrs. Beecham just as traditionally ignores. And make it good, people, she tells us, because if I get one more essay on my dad made me toast while Mama was away, we're doing 6 weeks of James Joyce. Solid. James Joyce, in case you're fortunate enough not to know, is the Mount Everest of writers. You read him because it's such grueling, hard-going that at the end you can plant a flag on the book and say, I prevailed. I reached the summit of Mount Joyce without the age of Sherpas or oxygen tanks, and I lived to tell the tale. However, as I bet there aren't more than 2 other people in the room who have any idea who the heck he is, the whole threat thing is kind of pointless. But as I said, my mom's a writer, so I know this stuff enough to shudder at the thought. The rest of my classmates start filing out, scrambling to get to their next class before the bell rings. 3 pages typed, she calls after them, and rough drafts by next Wednesday. And then it's just me standing in front of her desk. I want to ask if I can approach the bench, but I have a feeling it won't go over all that well. Yes, what is it? Mrs. Beecham asked with a sigh. Actually, she adds a put upon sigh as punctuation to every one-on-one interaction I've ever seen her have. She once got even so exasperated with us kids for pestering her for clarifications that she'd slammed a book down on her desk. I'm here to teach, she told us in the resulting stunned silence, not to answer questions. When the time comes, I'm going to push for getting that inscribed on her gravestone like a family motto. I never knew my father, I tell her. Consider yourself lucky. Most of them are pigs anyway. Not what I was expecting, but she's on a roll now. If I hadn't met my father, I would have been a whole lot better off, let me tell you. For one thing, I can guarantee I'd be doing something worthwhile with my life instead of being stuck here teaching the same junk year after year. Well, okay then, this is going well. I start to ask if I could write about my mom instead, but she's gone, lost in her own world. But they're classics, she whines, presumably mimicking some member of the school administration. Classics my ass, she tells me. If you listen to those spineless worms on the school board, you'd think nothing worthwhile had been written since Mark Twain. That sounds pretty frustrating, I mumble. But what should I do about the assignment? Frustrating? You don't know the meaning of frustrating. You kids all whine and moan about the assignments. 3 whole pages. Please, I've been doing the same curriculum twice a year for 15 years. 15 years at 60 3-page papers a year. Do you know how much I've read? I start doing the math in my head, but she's plowing onward, saving me the effort. 2,700 pages. 2,700 pages of mostly incoherent drivel from you people. So don't you complain, Missy. Don't you dare complain. I wasn't, I protest. I just need to know how to do the assignment without a dad. That's not really my problem, now is it? Excuse me? She looks down at me over her glasses. This is a creative writing class. Be creative. Write about how the jerk broke your poor mother's heart, or about all the lies he told her. I really don't think it was like that, Mrs. Beecham. Yeah, right. Is he dead? She demands. I suddenly remember there's no Mr. Beecham. Shocking, I know. I don't think so, I reply. She smiles at me like she just checkmated me. Then it was like that. Trust me. Hey, Peter Piper, I call out as I finally come out of school. He's standing next to this massive oak tree in the school's front yard, and he doesn't dignify my adornment of his name with even the faintest of eye rolls. The tree doesn't react either, but given that it's a tree and he's Peter, neither of these events are particularly surprising. By the way, have I mentioned how much I just love this tree? It's just brilliant. It's supposedly been here long before there was a here. And despite its size, it somehow figured out how to offer no shade at all, no matter where the sun is in the sky. I've never been able to figure out how it manages this trick, but if I had to deal with people carving their names into me and covering me with TP on an annual basis, I wouldn't give them any shade either. Peter steps away from the tree and matches strides with me as I pass. It's just Peter, he says, patiently. He's always patient with me, even when most people would want to throw me in front of a bus. Which may explain why he's my best friend, I suppose, because if your friends are trying to throw you in front of buses, something is seriously wrong with your life. I'd met him when we moved into our current apartment building filled with double-income families. Unfortunately, the 2 incomes tend to be both earned by a single parent working 2 jobs that together pay in the low to starvation range. Peter's family is the exception in that he still has both parents, though with all the weed they smoke, he could mash their brains together and the resulting creature still wouldn't be as sharp as my mom. I wouldn't particularly want to meet it in a dark alley either, but I guess that's pretty much a given for anything created from 2 brains. Don't get me wrong, they're nice enough, and they do their best to take care of Peter. It's just that their best isn't particularly good. So where was I? Oh yeah, I was telling you how I met Peter. We've moved so many times that I can't remember where we were coming from. but my job is always to sit on the lawn of the new place and guard our stuff as Mom makes trip after trip in our old station wagon, moving our prized possessions, one carload at a time. Of the 2 or 3 carloads, only two things are really mine. A huge bag of books and a ratty suitcase filled with hand-me-down clothes, which are always somehow mostly smaller than I currently am, but which are insufficiently worn out to be replaced. Sorry, I pressed the page up when I meant to press page down.
It happens.
You can cut that out, I hope. Of these, I only really care about my books, and my clothes can go up in flames for all I care. Well, as long as I'm not wearing them at the time. But yet, back to another move. Mom was on her second or third trip, and there I was, bored out of my mind. So I decided to break open my book box and see if Frankenstein was anywhere close to the top. It is, without a doubt, one of my favorite books. And yes, I know that makes me officially weird. Most of my generation don't want to have to do with anything more than 20 minutes old, and my favorite book just had its 200th birthday. If you've never read it, trust me, it's nothing like what you expect. In some ways, Dr. Frankenstein is even more of a monster than his creation, and I can totally relate with the monster's perspective of having the world all around you, but being outside of it, only able to look in. Sure, being the poor kid on the free lunch program isn't exactly the same as being a reanimated creature too hideous to be gazed upon, but still, not being seen for yourself can be pretty exhausting either way. I had settled down and was in the middle of chapter 4 when the sun pretty much went away. I looked up and found myself in the shadow cast by this really big guy looking down at me. "Hey," he said, then apparently realized he was blocking my sun because he took a large step to his left and it all came streaming back in. I blinked in the sudden light and tried to place him, but the only thing I could think of was that he could be the monster himself. Well, in size at least, because this guy was anything but hideous to look at. "So I was wondering," he said, "if I could borrow your copy of Frankenstein, when you're done with it, of course." I had no idea who this kid was, and considering the obvious questions that brought up, I decided to go straight for an even more basic one. "Why?" I asked, looking up at him innocently. At this point in the conversation, most people will just stare at you blankly with a "that does not compute" glaze in their eyes. Like when a waiter bounces up to you and says, "If you need any help, my name's Candy," and you reply, "What's your name if I don't need any?" It kind of short circuits their brain, and you can almost hear the gears whirring as they try and go back and make sense of what you said. And of course, this is exactly what I expected to happen to Peter. For yes, this is Peter, and this is the moment I've been talking about when I first met him. "'Cause rats ate my copy," he responded patiently, without any hint of grinding gears, smoke, or glazed look at all. Impressive. "Everyone's a critic," I tell him, wondering if he'll follow my logic. Actually, they were pretty indiscriminate. They also ate one of my shoes." I'm beginning to like this kid, not that I'd ever let him know. "Right or left?" I asked, as if it somehow mattered. "Left, definitely. I remember Mitch, that's my dad, saying it was ironic that they ate the left shoe, because with that one gone, now the right shoe is left." Ouch. Did I mention his parents' brains are kind of crosswired? This kind of stuff comes out of their mouths all the time, and a lot of it's pretty funny, all the more so because they've absolutely no idea that it is. "You know," I mentioned casually, "lending a book to someone who has rats which eat them is kind of like lending money to somebody with a gambling problem. They're not so much my rats as rats who pretty much sublet the entire building." Great. I'm just loving this new place already. "If they bother you, though," he tells me, "you can always get coyote urine from predator pee. Works like a charm. The downside, of course, is that your bedroom kind of smells like a bunch of coyotes peed in it. Or you could just embrace the rats as another marvel of nature's infinite adaptability. And anyways, watch a little Black Plague among friends." "One of these days," I commented to the universe at large, "I would really like to live in a place that didn't involve choosing among book-eating rats, coyote pee, and the Black Death." "Yeah, that would be nice, wouldn't it? So can I borrow your book?" Since the whole pee thing grossed me out, and having my precious books turned into rat turds was not something I wanted to risk. After we were all moved in, he took me to this vacant lot where everyone dumps their junk, and we found an old metal filing cabinet they lugged up to our apartment for me. It must have been from the 20s or 30s, because this sucker was made of real steel, nothing like that tinfoil aluminum stuff they sell nowadays. Weighed a ton, but it's been a lifesaver. Some people have gun safes. Me, I have a book safe. In return, I let him come and read anytime he wants. But back to me, Peter, and the shadeless oak tree that I started talking about like half a chapter ago. Can I borrow a memory? I asked him as we started walking to the Green Line T station to catch our train home. Sure, the Orange Line is closer and takes about 1 billion fewer stops, but what can I say? I like green. And it's not like we have anything particularly exciting to do once we get to our luxury living accommodations anyways, so why the hurry? Life is a journey, not the destination. Therefore, the longer we can make the journey last, the longer we'll live. Or something like that. By the way, for those of you outside Boston, the T is the subway, short for the MTA, which stands for mediocre transport autocracy, or something like that. Some of the stations are pretty cool, with art and bronze clothing and stuff. Ours isn't one of them. I mean it, I tell him. I need a memory I can borrow for Mrs. Beecham's insipid Oedipus-inspired father relationship assignment. He doesn't respond, just slowly turns and gives me the look. You know, the look that says, you didn't really just say that, did you? Which of course I did, or he wouldn't have given me the look in the first place. So of course I hit him. Remind me not to do that. The guy's made of concrete or something, because it's like hitting a brick wall. Ow! As I shake my hand in the air to get some feeling back into it, or at least some feeling other than pain, I glare at him if it were all somehow his fault, but he shrugs, not buying it. I rub my poor bruised hand as we descend into the open maw of Boylston Station. It's cool and dim in there after the bright afternoon sun, and I fish in my backpack and we flash our Charlie cards and we head out to the platform. A train's already sitting there, so we run for it, taking the stairs 2 at a time, then dashing into the car just as the doors, well, do nothing. And they keep on doing nothing for about another 10 minutes, and we get to watch everyone else do exactly the same thing we did. See the car from the top of the stairs and risk a broken neck running down to catch the train just before it doesn't leave. Doesn't have to be a good memory, I say as we continue to wait. How about the one when Mitch thought he was the prophet David, or when you went camping and the raccoons found his stash? The doors finally slide shut and the car lurches forwards. I plead all the way to our stop in Roxbury, the dissolved municipality we call home. Yes, some people get burgs or boroughs or townships, or even just cool neighborhoods like Angleside, Ravenswood, or Pigeon Hill like you have over in Waltham. Me, I get to live in a dissolved municipality, an Alka-Seltzer of a former town, whose buildings often look like they've been sitting there dissolving away over the years, ever since the proud city of Roxbury was eaten by Boston and dissolved into the melting pot of greater Bosburbia, relegated to a mere backwater of a neighborhood. But we will never forget. Well, that's true mostly because nobody ever learns that stuff anymore, because it happened about 150 years ago. It's kind of hard to forget something you never knew. But the principle is sound, and there's always Wikipedia. Peter's still shaking his head no as we climb up the 4 flights to our floor. Mitch is a bad enough influence in general, Peter tells me, and you in particular don't need another one. Why don't you write about when your father was your own imaginary friend? It was about 3 and it wasn't real. It was real to you. Yeah, so was the tooth fairy. He looks at me concerned. What are you saying? Nothing. I'm sure there are millions of cute little pixies out there who have nothing better to do than collect used teeth. They aren't pixies, they're fairies, he tells me. And I'm pretty sure they're not all that cute. Probably more like Rosie the Riveter with wings. I'm fairly sure he's putting me on, but when you look in the dictionary under deadpan, it says see Peter. Well, at least it does now since I whited out the old definition and penned that one in. I know, me, the literary literist, defacing a book. In my defense, I put a picture of Peter next to the entry, which means I also actually faced the book. So between that and the defacing, it should cancel itself out, karmically speaking. I am turning into Mitch with this whole right shoe left thing. Maybe Peter has a point about him being a bad influence after all.
Nice. That was very fun. That was very fun. I especially like that you've created a main character who is a word nerd, as I am, and somebody who lives in Boston. I lived there for some time in my younger years, in my 20s, and I fell in love with the place. So it's really fun to hear somebody set a story in that place.
Yeah, I grew up outside of Boston, but we used to go in a lot, and I have friends who lived there. And I used to juggle with the MIT Juggling Club
Very
on
fun.
the MIT campus, even though there were no MIT members currently in the club.
Well, you got to fill your days somehow, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I didn't go to MIT, mind you,
The
but
the tea was one of my favorite Boston experiences.
yeah.
That and Make Way for Ducklings.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So,
And the art
um,
race.
yes. So, is there another book coming after this? Is this a
I wasn't
standalone? Is this a
intending
series?
it is a complete standalone.
Okay.
It's looking like it's becoming a series
Well, that's
because
fun.
I've had a number of people beg me for it, which I figure is a good start. So
That is
um,
very awesome.
I've definitely started working on plotting out the next one. So I think it will be. I mean, she's a great character to spend time with, and she just sort of um, uh, uh, just comes to me. Actually, a lot of people who know me say they see a lot of me in her.
Hmm.
Um, uh,
She's a goofy character to, and I love the way you put us inside her head. That's super fun.
yeah, yeah. Well, you've only seen the beginning.
Well, I've added you to my TBR, so
Okay. Yeah,
um,
it's actually one of the difficulties in sort of people say, "What's the book about?" And I can give you the plot, but
mhm.
the book is so much more about who she is
Sure.
going through the plot than it
Yeah.
is about the plot per se. I mean, it's a nice, strong plot.
Well, and
Um,
those are the books that are super fun because they stick with us because there's so much for us to grab onto.
right, but it makes
Uh,
it really hard. What's your elevator pitch?
yeah.
You I mean, if I say, well, it's a girl looking for her father,
The dreaded synopsis is called the dreaded synopsis for a
yeah,
reason,
yeah,
and nobody likes writing them.
yeah, yeah,
Thank you so much for being on the program. I'm really glad that we got to do this, and I look forward to having you back for another read later.
yeah. Well, thank you. I had a great fun.
Awesome.